Lawyers, public defenders of Reddit, what is the dumbest case you have ever had to argue? I represented a guy who asked chic father-in-law if they would donate anything as a giveaway for a car show he was running. They agree and hand him like 300 free chicken sandwich coupons. The thing is, there was no car show. The guy just convinced them there was and pocketed all the coupons. For those wondering, this is theft by deception. Chic father-in-law is theoretically out like $4 per sandwich. Chic father-in-law doesn't sue. They just tell the cops and they take care of the rest. I didn't handle final disposition, but he'd have gotten probation. I studied this case in a law class. And it's hilariously stupid, but it went to the Washington Supreme Court. A 5-year-old moved an old lady's chair before she sat in it. And she fell over. She sued the 5-year-old for battery. The court found that 5-year-olds can indeed be liable for a tort. I can understand the old lady being upset. But suing a 5-year-old for battery? Really? That's pretty harsh for someone that just wanted to move a chair. BTW, how long ago was this case? I represented a condo board that wanted to evict a woman. The condo bylaws allowed for up to 2 cats, provided the board gave permission. This woman had 19 cats, none of which had approval. This woman showed up to court and argued that she shouldn't be evicted since there were only 6 cats. Client hired accountant. Accountant did work. Client decided not to pay accountant. Accountant sends me demand letter for full sum plus interest. Since their contract stipulated there'd be interest for late payment, I convince accountant to settle for full amount owing in the contract, but no interest. Client doesn't pay. Accountant files statement of claim and gets summary judgment for amount owing, interest, and legal fees. I don't act for that client anymore. I defended a conversion case, essentially a civil theft allegation, where the parties were fighting over possession of a giant collection of Lord of the Rings memorabilia. Like tens of thousands of dollars worth. I know those books backwards and forwards. I occasionally work lines into the pleadings. It would have been intolerable not to. My favorite was Oft Evil Will Shall Evil March. This isn't from the lawyer's point of view but the defendant's. My dad is an ER doctor. He had a patient come in with an eye infection. Since he is not an ophthalmologist, he could not diagnose or treat a disease of the eye. He gives the lady some eye drops to help with the pain, and tells her to go see an eye doc ASAP to get the infection actually treated. BTW, he sent her home with written instructions too. So lady goes home and never sees the eye doctor. Infection gets worse. She ends up needing a cornea transplant because she's a ducking idiot. Then she sues my dad for malpractice and somehow ducking won. Luckily my dad's malpractice insurance covered it, but JFC. The kicker is that malpractice suits in my state have a time limit to file. Hers was filed right before the time limit expired, because that's how long it took for her to find a lawyer to take the case. TLDR. Woman ignores doctor's orders. Has to get surgery. Gets money because she's an asshole. Another not me, but my aunt is a civil suits lawyer and usually everything is settled out of court. So she mostly just does paperwork. But she has had a few cases go to trial and this is one of her absolute favorites, and one of the dumbest suits I have ever heard. A middle-aged woman is shopping in her nearby $5 store. She comes to a wall of hanging toilet seats, you know, the really nice toilet seats you buy at a dollar store. She is looking at the toilet seats and proceeds to remove one to further inspect it. Somehow one of the seats just above the seat she removed falls and hits her in the head. So she obviously goes to the nearest attorneys to sue this store for gross negligence. She could have been seriously injured by this falling toilet seat. Details come out, and there was already a sign on the toilet seat wall telling customers to ask for assistance before removing anything. Workers' witness testimony say there is very little chance this woman missed the sign. Honestly, from the details it sounded like this woman was just looking for some free cash. But my aunt's job is to win the case, no matter how stupid or frivolous. Somehow she got a jury to agree the store was at fault. and the woman won $10,000. The case and arguments got published in a monthly journal on trials. Probably because it was just so entertaining, I will try to procure the actual published story if I can. And that's the story of why your local Family Dollar has a glass case around the toilet seats. TLDR, it's raining toilet seats. Edit, OP delivers. I missed a few details, but it's pretty much the same idea. My friend represented the city in a theft case. He was forced to prosecute a one-legged elderly man who took some cans from a curbside recycling container. Don't duck with city property, folks. Wow, that city was savage, lol. Just curious. Would it be legal if he were removing cans from the trash cans instead of the recycling bin? Trash is typically considered abandoned, so there isn't a problem. However, many cities now have ordinances prohibiting trash collecting in an effort to curb dumpster diving. This is typical in cities with large homeless populations. Not my client, but I listened to a hilarious plea negotiation for a granny who was busted for a DUI. She was like 83 and arrested driving a boat of a caddy. Anyway, negotiations were going well until the prosecutor, who was flipping through pages and pages of this granny's rap sheet, gasps and says, Moore was tried for attempted murder in 1973. Witty barbs were traded. The defense attorney argued the merits of Granny's acquittal. And eventually the prosecutor offered a reasonable plea, but not until after much speculation about whether Granny did it. Not a lawyer, but true story that fits well here. Woman went to Disney the Magic Kingdom and stood kicking the castle for about 3 hours. Some cast members observed her behavior and reported it to security. A couple weeks later, she attempted to sue Disney Parks and Resorts, saying a brick had fallen from the castle and landed on her foot. The castle isn't made out of bricks. End of case. Public defender here. Just last week I had a client who was charged with kicking in somebody's door to steal a kitten. Quite literally a cat burglar. I chuckled. Father is a personal injury attorney. Heard this story from a circle of his friends. Woman, driving at night, ends up running over a drunk in the middle of the road. Turns out the drunk is rich. Woman decides to sue his estate for the injury sustained to her neck when her car went over his body. Edit, I want to say that the victim had previously crashed his car into a ditch. Hence why he was wandering in the road drunk for a bit prior to being run over. Not a lawyer, but my dad works for a hotel chain that got sued. What happened essentially was a son and a father were staying at this resort and were checking out, but had a few hours to kill before their flight. Deciding they wanted to go jet skiing, they asked the lady at the front desk of a place they could go to. She suggested a place that was no way affiliated with the hotel. It was just a company nearby. Well, they go jet skiing. But the dad falls off his jet ski and the son drives over him and kills his dad. So instead of realizing, hey, that's a tragic accident, they sue. Not the ski company that rented them the jet ski ice. No, the hotel where they asked where they could jet ski. I had to prosecute a woman in the Tampa Bay area because she had received a citation for not having her cat on a leash while it was outdoors. The poor old lady brought in pictures of her outdoor cat to show how cute it was. I'm not even fully convinced she owned the cat, as all she did to care for it was put some food and water outside by her shed. At that point I was fully convinced of two things, the first being that my civic duty had been more than satisfied by imposing a fine upon this poor old woman. Also, that Florida was not the place for me, as everyone in the courtroom actually seemed to think getting a fine from this woman was just and worth the taxpayer time wasted to achieve the same. Florida is an interesting place. Not me, but I was watching a case where this kid was throwing burning dog shit on his neighbor's porch and running away. The public defender just looked like he could give two sheets and forced the kid to plead guilty and got 4 years in a juvenile detention center. One time when I was waiting in court for a friend's case of MIP, I heard a guy attempt to argue that his drug possession should be taken away. The drugs were found in a search of his car after he was pulled over for making an illegal turn onto a one-way street that ended up being legal. His argument that the stop was not legal so the search of his vehicle was done illegally was denied by the judge because the possession was filed as a separate charge. Meaning the search was considered to be done with probable cause and related to being pulled over. The judge was a real ass about two. He kept repeating, but you did have Drew Gus on you, ignoring every argument the kid said until he said yes and changed his plea to guilty. Everyone seems to be listing dumbest clients. But the dumbest case implies it's the allegation, not the defendant or the defense. So here goes. Violation of probation. Underlying charges are 3 third-degree felonies, punishable by up to 5 years prison. Basically, teenager with younger teenager whose mom finds out. Condition: no contact with minors. This condition is too general. Was used on an old form for some reason. Been held to be too broad for over 20 years. Client moves to modify so he can speak with his brothers, different adoptive family. 1-2 years younger. Not same-sex as victim. Texts brothers in the meantime. Other dad finds out about texts. He doesn't like client. Tells client's probation officer. Affidavit of violation filed. A week later. Hearing on client's motion to modify. Motion granted. Hearing on client's violation of probation. A month later. Revoked. Judge sentences this 19-year-old kid to 15 years in prison. 3 consecutive 5-year terms. The system is so broken that this is normal. Not me. But a friend's dad was a public defender for a drug dealer and they had freaking video, with audio, of the deal going down but the guy still wanted to go to court. I have no idea why. After sitting on a jury, I have little to no faith that any jury trial will end in the obvious and rational verdict. Not me. But when I lived overseas with the military I decided to sit in on a trial. Because why not? The trial was about a guy who bought TVs on base, which are somewhat cheaper because of no taxes, and used them for a private business of his off base. Which was a mixture of an American breakfast restaurant in the morning and a Buffalo Wild Wings in the afternoon and evenings with the trivia and sports games. Anyways. Living in East Asia at the time. It was nice to get a slice of home. Apparently, buying stuff on base and using it off base for a profit is counted as black marketing because he was exploiting the advantages of the exchange on base department store. He ending up being convicted. And the TVs he bought with his own money were confiscated and the people that took them weren't too gentle with the wiring. The owner eventually had to close the restaurant because the TV gimmick was what really drew in business. Real shame. Not a lawyer. But in my previous job, loss prevention, we had to go to court almost weekly for our cases. While waiting, there was a woman that was on the stand for prostitution. She had a translator. And the translator, lawyer, and judge negotiated. Judge says translator, please let your client know that I could send her to jail for this. Translator does. Translator, please ask your client if she would be able to afford a $100 fine. The defendant very loudly says, "Itch please. I have $300 in my pocket right now." Judge slams the gavel. The fine will be $300 then. Just posted this one to Artalis from Thor recently. Reddit.com. Was at a cattle call plea hearing last Friday. Most of the facts in cases were pretty standard. Then we get to the winner for the day. Guy is manager of a pizza place. Goes to the restaurant after hours. Is seen on camera pulling in his car. Using a key. Entering his individual security code into the alarm system. Last 4 digits of his social security number. Then uses his personalized code to unlock the safe. Leaves. And texts a friend the following. I just stole $3,000 from the safe at work. SHHHHHH. I wouldn't want to show my face in court either. Not lawyer but family self-defended, so kinda. My grandparents sold their house. Right on closing day. The buyers called them up and told them they were withholding $30,000 from the sale price because my grandparents had left holes in the walls from paintings and such. removed trees and plants from the backyard and removed an entertainment unit, which was specifically listed as not included in the sale documents. Literally wasted 6 months of our lives defending ourselves. Gave my grandma an ulcer from the stress and they lost in the end and were forced to pay for pain and suffering and whatnot. They literally had zero ground to stand on. We think that they were assuming that most people couldn't afford to be out $25,000 and potential legal fees when they had just bought a new home, but my grandparents were downsizing and not in the mood to be ducked with. My grandpa defended himself and man. He is scary as shit to be questioned by as a grandfather, let alone on a witness stand. Apparently the wife of the buying couple almost cried when questioned by him. The judge later complimented his legal abilities. Haha. The neighbor testified that no plants had been taken, and that the buyers had basically tried to coerce him into not testifying that. The holes in the walls were tiny as shit and to be expected, and the wall unit bullshit was just the craziest, being that it was literally listed in the sale as not included. It wasn't built in but looked like it. The sad thing is my grandma literally cleaned the house spotless, like she already has a house clean enough to eat off the floors, and left them a welcome gift basket. They're such ducking nice people. And two assholes decided they could be easily ducked with. Obligatory not me. But I watched while I clerked for a judge. A crackhead shot his crackhead friend in a dispute about the latter smoking more than his fair share. The guy who was shot's girlfriend drives him to the ER. But has warrants. So literally kicks him out of the car and speeds off. He only got shot in the arm. So the hospital had him patched up in no time, and he told the cops the whole story while still on those good hospital drugs. Flash forward to trial. The men are friends again. And the guy who was shot has written a letter. In the most shockingly beautiful cursive stating, "I verily swear that Bob did not shoot me. I don't know who did. Thank you." He also recorded a shitty cell phone video where he verily swears. Even the guy's defense attorney was convinced the letters were actually more damning than the confession. They didn't even ask their own client questions on the stand. They just allowed him to testify. Which is the ethical way attorneys balance their client's right to testify without supporting perjury. But wouldn't you know it? The jury found him not guilty. Everyone including the shooter was visibly shocked. He got to go home scot-free. When the jury was questioned they were basically, "The other guy verily swore." Juries. You never know. Not a lawyer, but I took law in high school. We had a field trip one day to the courthouse. Total snooze fest until I heard a woman had allegedly assaulted her boyfriend with a frozen pizza. Dunno how that one played out. Lawyers fought it out for a bit. Then court was out for lunch. Afterwards we got to see a federal case. Don't remember what it was, but it was boring as duck. A lady was abducted by a stranger at gunpoint from a CVS at 1 AM. Forced to drive 2 counties over and then raped. The client maintained that the encounter was consensual and that he was just too good looking to have to force women to have sex with him. This is only sort of answering the question, but it's my favorite thing that has happened in court, so I'm posting it anyway. I used to work out of a courthouse in Virginia where attire was taken very seriously and the wrong attire was seen as a sign of disrespect toward the court. A guy showed up for his case wearing really baggy jean shorts and an oversized t-shirt. We were in a particularly strict courtroom that day, and the judge's head deputy told this young man that he had to leave because he was dressed inappropriately for court. He didn't cause too much of a fuss and stepped out into the hallway. His case got called a few minutes later, and when the judge asked the attorney why the defendant wasn't standing in front of him, the attorney explained that he had been asked to leave the courtroom because of his outfit. The judge looked pissed and the attorney quickly said, "Your Honor, to be fair, he's in front of you on an indecent exposure charge. So he's dressed a lot better than he was at the time of the offense." The judge did not find this amusing, but the rest of the courtroom totally cracked up. I'm a law student and I read this case about a taxi driver who bit a finger off a client. Before the finger biting part, the client hit the driver in the head and then dared to ask the driver to sit with him on the front seat. I charged a defendant with introduction of contraband in a jail. He was arrested on a separate warrant and smuggled meth inside his house to pass the time behind bars. Deputies located him strung out in his cell. And his excuse was that a group of scary men burst into his cell with the Drew gus and forced him to get high. Cameras easily disproved it. Meth goes duress defense. Works every time. Had a guy who used a clear plastic bag over his head to protect his identity during break-ins of business with surveillance cameras. Needless to say, his picture came in pretty much perfect. I was on the opposite end. I was being sued by a 65-year-old lady who was drunk at 2 p.m. and hit me at a dead stop, going 60 miles per hour. We couldn't prove she had been drinking because her husband, a retired cop, showed up to the scene and convinced the cops not to charge. You can't charge after the fact. We were only going after insurance for medical bills. We all sustained horrible injuries. But one day I find out she's suing me. My lawyer is furious. She shows up to my deposition and demands she cut in and do hers because I'm a lying itch, and then proceeds to tell my lawyers on video that she doesn't know where I came from, that I could have dropped out of the sky for all she knew. But I cut her off and admitted to an unknown amount of wine at a friend's house while on methadone. She was so positive it wasn't her fault that she just admitted everything we had no evidence of. Her lawyer literally face-palmed. My favorite client. 19-year-old kid. Gets super drunk. Walks to a strip club. Hands a bouncer ID. Enters a club and immediately breaks into a storage room. Grabs a bunch of porn DVDs. Gets grabbed by bouncer while trying to leave with DVDs stuck under his shirt. Everything caught on tape. The kid woke up in the Husaga with no memory of any of it. Cops had to explain to him that he had been trying to steal shitty porno DVDs instead of just looking that shit up on Google like a normal person. I once had to argue a case in which a server was charged with theft and forgery because they misread a tip line on a credit card receipt. The diner had written in a 0 but had left a tail at the top of the digit that made it look like a 6. The diner also failed to enter in the total at the bottom and left that blank. The $6 was just shy of 10%, so the server made the addition of the $6 to the tab and wrote that in the total line. The diner came back in a few days after and raised holy hell with the management, alleging the server was stealing from her. Management apologized profusely and refunded the diner their $6. Still not satisfied. The diner then went to the police. And just like that, a felony and a misdemeanor charge. I'm way late on this, but it's a good one. I once defended a woman in an eviction case where she, without permission of the landlord, converted the garage of the rental house into a bedroom with a bathroom. The bathroom she created apparently drained into the floor drain typical in garages. I attempted to defend her, but lost spectacularly. At least partially because she failed to show at trial. He was in the county jail for unrelated reasons. My wife sat on the jury for a case of a couple that sued a local school district. High school has a building trades program where students build a house with professional help and guidance and then sell. Couple, both husband and wife are realtors, buys the house and moves in. 2 years later, wife goes into the unfinished attic and falls through to the garage, breaking both ankles. Buyers argue that no one told them the attic was unfinished, as in no floor, and want $5 million. Jury did not find in their favor. My father-in-law was the dumbest con man in a lawsuit a few years back. His electricity was cut off due to non-payment. So of course he spent what money he did have on Kentucky Deluxe and passed out in the house. It was a really hot summer. And apparently at some point he crawled out the back door for air. We found him. He was put in ICU. He files suit on the electric company for cutting off his electricity since he is disabled, doesn't like working, never has, and wins. He is hands down the dumbest, luckiest criminal I know. Not a lawyer. Have to do legal sheet. Customer filed a lawsuit because a cashier checked his $20 bill for the watermark when the pen was inconclusive. She had been reprimanded for taking a counterfeit bill, so she was being extra cautious. He claimed she caused him embarrassment and questioned his honor or some such bullshit. Part of an acoustical ceiling tile fell but hit no one. Dust, however, fell on a mother and son standing near. They both go to the ER claiming neck and back injuries. They were both discharged with, and I shit you not, no visible signs of injury, compensation seeking behavior. Both sued. I filled in for another lawyer at my firm for a plea deal. I spent a total of 15 minutes with my client getting mitigating factors so the judge would accept the deal. All I knew was the guy was being recommended to drug court. As we're all standing before the judge, the solicitor recites the facts of the case. Apparently, my client got high on meth, broke into a neighbor's house, put on his belt, and passed out in his bed. Needless to say, it was hard trying to keep a straight face. So many to choose from. But I think the worst one was defending against claims related to skincare products being as effective as advertised. Working weekends to prepare that case held a part of my soul.